Hello, party people. We are back once again. I am Bryce, and I'm here to talk about movies. In particular, I'm going to talk to you about Evil Dead Rise, the newest horror film in the movie sphere that just premiered over the weekend, and I've had the privilege of seeing twice within the last few days. I went and saw it for the first time on Thursday, and then I saw it again this morning, which is Sunday. I'm on one today. I have watched 3 movies, all of which were horror. I wasn't expecting to watch 3 movies today. I woke up and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be at home. Let's go see Evil Dead Rise again. It's been on my mind for like 4 days. Then right after that, I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling strong. Let's go see The Pope's Exorcist. So immediately after Evil Dead Rise, walked my happy ass back into the theater and watched The Pope's Exorcist, another good movie. I'll talk about that in a different video. And then when I came home, I'm like, you know what? I can't remember what The Evil Dead from 2013 felt like, so I'm gonna watch that again. Shockingly, it was probably the least favorite movie I watched today out of the 3. The Evil Dead movie that I watched from 2013, that is. So I'm just gonna kind of cut into the chase. Evil Dead Rise is a borderline masterpiece. If I'm going to go see it a third time next week, and I have a feeling it might convert me to just saying this movie is a masterpiece. I loved it so damn much that I'm going to say it is in my top 3 of favorite horror movies of all time. I haven't had a horror experience like this where I was freaking out and disturbed by the imagery since I saw Hereditary on a whim in 2018. This movie did just about everything perfectly that I could have ever hoped or wanted for in a horror movie. And most importantly, above all, it was a horror movie that was actually scary. I've been kind of at a love-hate relationship with the horror genre within the past few years because it's like the definition of horror I just think has gotten so loose. To me, what horror is walking out of a movie and being really fucking scared when you leave or being scared in the middle of it. And it's just been a long time since I've been genuinely freaked out by a movie in some way, shape, or form. And I knew that this film had a lot of promise from the first trailer that they released a few months back. So I cannot believe how much I really enjoyed the movie. My second viewing, I only grew to love it even more, which I'll talk about a little bit more depth in just a second. But the short of it, after the long of it, is go see this movie and take all of your friends. Hell, take strangers. Go take people you just meet on the street and go see this movie because it's a once in a maybe a decade kind of experience. It's riveting. It's really, really exciting. So let's get through the play-by-play here. So let me start off with my first viewing. I can't believe this is the second week in a row where I've watched the same movie in theaters twice. So my first viewing, I went to see it in a pretty busy theater. I went and saw it with 2 friends, so I think that amplified my excitement for it. That's just something my friends and I like to do. We like to watch horror movies together, which is fantastic. After the first viewing, I was like, okay, this movie's a 9 out of 10 in my book. I didn't qualify it as a borderline masterpiece. I think I had a few problems with it, but kind of sticking to, I guess, the more positive aspects of the movie. The first time around, I was really impressed by the amount that the film actually made me scared. Now, you can attribute this to probably a few different things at once. 1, the movie's excellent cinematography. 2, the movie's excellent sound design. 3, the movie's stellar cast, because just about every single one of them just crushes it. Less to maybe one minor performance that is totally forgivable because that person's hardly in the movie for longer than a scene or 2. On top of that, did I talk about the disturbing imagery? Well, if I did, I'm going to talk about it again. The disturbing imagery, it makes my skin crawl in this movie. The way that they take this very innocent looking mother who loves her children at the very beginning of this movie and transforms her into this creature that just freaks you out. Oh my God, it was just so admirable, and it scared the hell out of me. I mean, even just the presence on screen of the different CGI, the way they colored their eyes at certain points, the blood pouring from their mouth, the carnage everywhere, the body movements, it was just amazing. And that kind of leads me into a bit of a transition into the cinematography piece that I've touched upon a little bit. There are quite a few sequences in this movie that leverage a technique that I quite haven't seen before in films. One of which you can actually see in the trailer when the mom, who is a phenomenal performer played by Alyssa Sutherland, that's a whole nother story altogether, is at the stove in the trailer making eggs, and the camera's like kind of zoomed in on her mouth, so like she is inevitably close to the camera like this, and between her and the rest of the family, including her sister and her 3 kids, is kind of blurred in the middle, and then it's just them freaking out at what she's saying. Oh my God, it's techniques they use like that. I think I counted maybe 3 times they use that technique, and I could even be missing a few of them, but that technique just works so well, where it's like the scariest part of the shot is in your face. However, you can at the same time see the reactions of the loved ones just freaking out, and it was so effective, and I absolutely loved it. The second aspect of the cinematography that I really appreciated, that really scared the hell out of me, was the brilliant use of filming the camera as if they were in the middle of a door peep. You can also see this in the trailer. It's not a surprise. It's not a spoiler. I don't give any spoilers on my podcast or whatever you want to call this, my monologue, whatever. It was just so amazingly effective, because by doing that, they really can leverage the physical features of Alyssa Sutherland's character, the mom in this movie, to really make her look pretty freaky. And you kind of feel helpless as you get to step into the shoes of our protagonists, who are just looking out of this peephole at the monstrosity that is just outside the door. And it allows you to kind of take in their point of view and be terrified at what the hell they're seeing, because there's some awful, gruesome stuff going on there. And it was just, it made the movie really stick out in my mind and made it really, really special, apart from a ton of other things. Now, kind of transitioning a little bit more into the performance of this movie, you've heard me mention her name a couple times. Alyssa Sutherland is the actress who plays the mom, whose name is Ellie in this movie. She was phenomenal in this movie. She is the I guess villain, antagonist, whatever you want to call it. And I think I've heard some people describe her performance as, well, one, not only very savvy acting wise, but also the physical embodiment of the performance is what really sets it apart, because she's got to do some messed up stuff with her body. Now, granted, she did disclose in an interview that some of the stuff that is done, the really crazy shit, is done by contortionists that they hired, which is another story altogether. But the physicality of their performance, as I've heard some reviewers call it, is just a second to none. It really gets you convinced that this woman is out of her mind, is taken over by something else. It was just incredible, and I can't gush about her performance enough. And the best part about it is, before this event happens to her, you really buy her as a very convincing and loving mother, which really helps elevate the stakes and the tragedy of the movie. Now, where I will transition once again and kind of pivot on that here is what really also made this movie special, and what really made me get vested into it and almost a little sad about it, is the fact that this movie does a really good job of explicitly conveying to us in about the first 20 to 25 minutes of the experience that this is a very innocent family who has befallen a couple of tragedies as of late. They are there for each other. They love each other, and they don't want anything to happen to each other. So when the shit does finally hit the fan, you have this sort of sympathy for them, and you're like, oh my God, for some crazy tragic shit like this to go down, and it's happening to them, like, the movie really gets you to love and care about these characters. And I just thought that was a really nice piece, because I mean, if it's one thing if the tragedy and the scares are going on like that in and of itself could carry the movie, but what really elevates it is the fact that this family is so likable. I'm like, wow, like, this is a really good group of folks that seem like genuinely good people. So for something crazy like this to happen to them just really sucks, and again adds that little extra layer of intensity to it. And speaking of the entire family, the aunt, who is, I guess, our main protagonist in the movie, is played by Lily Sullivan. She is an Australian actress, if I'm not mistaken. She does a very excellent job in this movie as well. I think the pair of her and Alyssa Sutherland on both sides of the coin in this film provided some really interesting juxtaposition. You buy into the fact that they're sisters. They get into some really crazy stuff. Both of their performances, whether they are terrified, whether they are terrorizing, it was phenomenal. They both had a charisma about them that I really appreciated. Now, the other three performers that you're going to get kind of invested in and see more on screen in this movie, I'll pull them up right here in just a second. Geez, just looking at the poster flips my gourd, man. The other three cast members you're going to see in this film include Danny, who is the oldest boy. You will see the oldest boy who's played by Morgan Davies, as we can see. Bridget, who's played by Gabrielle Eccles, which in the trailers, I could have sworn that she was Selena Gomez. In fact, going into this movie, I thought she was Selena Gomez. And when I found out it wasn't, I'm like, wow, that is uncanny. I know it doesn't quite look like it in the picture here, but if you look in the trailer, I, honest to God, thought it was Selena Gomez. That freaked me out. And then I believe Nell Fisher, who plays the youngest sister, whose name is Cassie. And if I'm not mistaken, this was like this might have been her first or her second movie. It's kind of hard to tell because in the end credits, they say featuring Nell Fisher, but nevertheless, all three of them really help elevate this movie, because the fact of the matter is, we can have good leads, and sometimes that's enough to carry a movie, but in order to make it truly special, everybody's got to be clicking on all cylinders, and these three kids are phenomenal actors. I mean, my God, when you can tell that they're just terrified children trying to make it through this really confusing whirlwind of a time and trying to protect each other in the process. It's amazing. They really sell, one, that they love each other, and two, that they're just terrified out of their mind, and it really helps elevate the experience. So all of that to say, between those five people, so Alyssa Sutherland, Lily Sullivan, Morgan Davies, Gabrielle Eccles, and Nell Fisher playing as the family here, it really, all their performances combined to make the acting standard in this film really high, and it was really impressive and really helped elevate the experience for me personally. So I've touched upon the fact that this movie is scary, along with imagery, some cinematography. In fact, as I'm, let me pull up actually, I can see the trailer playing in IMDb in the background because just spooky stuff. But apart from that, the movie also does something else pretty cleverly, and that's actually adding in bits of comedy within it. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to tell you that as scared as I was watching this movie and thereafter, there were a couple of different points where I did genuinely laugh. I can't give away why because of spoilers, but this movie also knows when to have fun in the most effed up sense that you can possibly think of. Like they find a way to add in just a quick laugh into some of the awful events that unfold before you. It's just like, whoa, because your heart's going to beat at 100 miles an hour, but then you're going to start laughing at a couple of points. But if you know what I'm talking about, if any parts in the movie made you laugh, just drop them down in the comments. I'd love to hear which moments might have made you chuckle. What else am I missing in this movie? So maybe I'll talk about a couple of things that kind of bothered me in the film my first time around. So the one thing I think that is keeping me currently from having this movie as a masterpiece is I don't quite love the way in which they convey how this chain of events is unfolding and is made possible by Alyssa Sutherland's character becoming taken over, as it were. The how it happens, I didn't love how it was portrayed, although it was really thrilling and really exciting. I just think that it's a little consistent, the rules by which it transfers from there on, how these people get taken over, like it doesn't quite add up to me. And I think there's some holes. It's a little inconsistent in that way. Having said that, the rest of this movie is so incredible that it almost doesn't really matter. It's just, if I'm going to call this a masterpiece of a movie, I would love to have seen that just tweaked a little bit, perhaps made a little bit more consistent. The other thing that I didn't really love about this movie, and actually I heard a critic that I follow actually mention this as well, so I'm glad he cited it. It's Jeremy Johns, for you guys who are curious. The very beginning, the opening scene, and the very ending scene are both sequences that I didn't really think needed to be in the movie. I'm not sure why they were there. I'm fine with the opening scene because it really introduces us into what the heck we're getting into. It's a nice little prelude for things to come. The end of the movie, they didn't need it. I just think that, I know it was only 2 minutes long, the very end scene that they showed, but I just don't think it was really necessary because in truth, it really has nothing to do, or at least very little to do with the main 5 characters that I've already talked about, throughout the rest of this movie. So that's another thing I didn't love. Aside from that, one other thing I didn't particularly enjoy, at least on my first viewing, was there's a minor character, not the 5 that I've mentioned already. There's another minor character in this movie whose part I wasn't quite convinced by, or I just thought the dialogue was a little corny and it was a little distracting, not to the point where it like killed the moments for me. It was just kind of like, oh, that's kind of an odd way to go about this, I suppose, but that's a small nitpick. It doesn't matter who it was. It's just that was one small part that just took me out a little bit. So with all that, having said all of that, that was what my first experience was like for the movie. It was incredible. It was 9 out of 10 in my book. It was a very, very good viewing. Very few things that I didn't enjoy about it. It was one of the scariest horror experiences, one of the best horror experiences I've had in the last 5 years. Now, fast forward to today, when I went and watched my second viewing this morning, as I mess around with my computer. Give me 1 second. The second viewing made up my mind that this film is in fact a borderline masterpiece. Some of the aforementioned things that I said I didn't like before were a lot more permissible, a lot more forgivable in my mind than they were the first time around. Even then, it's not like it really took me all out of it in the first place, as it were. And I'm just actually going to put out the trailer in the background for those of you guys who are watching on video right now, just to have a little bit of background music here. But anyway, it cemented this movie in my mind as a borderline masterpiece. I'd still give it a 9 out of 10. Still, I don't think it's a perfect movie in my book. However, I feel compelled to go see this movie a third time, perhaps even a fourth time. My record for seeing a movie in theaters is 3. Maybe this won't be the one to break forward. The reason being is because it's so rare for a horror movie to come out that one is actually phenomenal, like on all levels, and is really well made and well acted and well directed, just like this, which I haven't shouted him out yet, but the director and the writer of this movie was Lee Cronin. Shout out to him. He's amazing. But seeing a movie like this with as loud as it can be on a huge screen like this, it only comes around once in a while, and I haven't been this excited about seeing a movie multiple times in theaters in a long time. So I feel compelled to go watch this again and again and again. And who knows, maybe I will change my mind and say that this movie is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, which check out on YouTube or any of my other socials for maybe if my feedback changes on that. So what changed between the first and the second viewing for me? What was like I should actually probably take this down for copyright reasons, but what changed between the first and the second viewing for me? What wasn't quite as a problem for me? One, the minor character's performance that I talked about earlier didn't bother me as much. I realized that person had fewer lines this time around. The dialogue wasn't as corny. In fact, I think they served as a really nice side step to the film at hand. It relieved some of the pressure off of the aforementioned 5 characters and actors that I've talked about already. They seemed a little bit more in place, like a person that they really cared, so I liked the character a little bit more for that. The bookends of the movie, the beginning and the end, and I just realized too, it wasn't Jeremy Jahns who talked about the bookends in the movie, it was Chris Stuckman, who's a very smart movie man. But anyways, the bookends of the movie also did not bother me as much. The ending scene, I still did not think that it needed to be there. Having said that, it was so short that it kind of flew by in just a few seconds. It was no big deal. It was no problem. The beginning of it, I actually really came to enjoy because, one, like I mentioned earlier, my opinion maintained the same, that it was a nice prelude of things to come. But it also established, like, it was like the appetizer to the movie, and also it featured one of the best title cards I have ever seen in a movie. And for those of you who don't know what I mean by title card, It's as if I just shift on over to IMDb here again, it's where they give you that first scene of the movie and then they show the title Evil Dead Rise at the, as it occupies the whole screen and makes a ton of loud noises. It makes you want to cover your ears because the theater's just so damn loud, but had a really awesome title card that featured it too. And I just thought it was a nice, all of that together made for a lot of good shock value, some really good scares right off the bat. It set the tone, and I think it really just got everyone ready for the film and exposed a really good title card. So that satiated me. I had less of a problem with the title cards. That leaves me with the problem earlier where I talked about when when the mom, Ellie's character, gets taken over in this movie, the how of exactly that happens. Now, the lore behind it to me is really fascinating, and I actually found it to be really creepy. In fact, it made for some of the more creepy parts of the movie. My philosophy on horror films is they can be scary and creepy, or either or. Scary is when you are freaking out in the moment and it makes you jump out of your seat and crawl out of your skin. Creepy is where it lingers with you for days or weeks after, and you find yourself thinking about it at home. The lore of the film is what really, I think, made it creepy. The way that they dipped into the mythology of it all, the way that the vinyl records that they play throughout the film. That's not a spoiler because I'm not giving away the content of those records, but the mythology around it and the way they explain it and the exposition that they give around that is what really made it creepy. The imagery and all the cinematography and all the other stuff that I talked about earlier, it was even more brilliant the second time around, is what really made it scary for me. Now, I'm kind of on my way to forgiving the movie for the manner in which these characters get taken over by whatever it is that's covered in the mythology. Having said that, I still can't quite forgive it. I still think that the movie is a little inconsistent with the way that it follows its own rules. I think it establishes these rules for some characters, but not others. And that inconsistency is what is keeping me by only about this much. For those of you who might be listening to this on audio, it's like I'm putting my fingers together to signal, maybe half an inch away from calling this movie a masterpiece. If I watch this movie a third and fourth time and I realize, there is a reason for that, and I catch it, well then to me this movie's got to be a masterpiece, because it's seriously, it's my favorite movie of 2023 so far, and it's my favorite horror film that I've seen in the past half decade, and it was so good that it's in my top 3 now. For those that are curious as to the remainder 2 in my top 3 horror movies of all time, it goes Insidious. This isn't in any order, by the way. It's Insidious, Hereditary, and now Evil Dead Rise. All 3 of those movies are like the trifecta. They are phenomenal and actually scary. For me to have a favorite horror film, it's got to be scary at minimum, and I think those 3 movies definitely fit the bill. The one that's kind of on the bubble that I could take or leave is The Conjuring from James Wan. James Wan is a mastermind in the space of horror, to be honest. Like, he makes some really scary shit, especially the first Insidious. That was like the first horror movie I ever watched, so that might be why I'm so freaked out by it. But, oh my God, I was freaked out for a month. I couldn't even walk around my house. It was ridiculous. But anyway, so on my second viewing, I forgave those 3 nitpicks from my first viewing to some extent. What really validated my feelings the second time around, one, the acting, of course, really sunk into me, and I really believe that firmly, that this is some of the best acting in a horror film that you will see in a long time, complete with characters that are actually likable, really interesting. And I think that the family dynamic that I touched upon a little bit earlier really hit a lot harder for me. I didn't quite latch onto the family the first time around as much as I did the second time around. I think the one line that really, I'm not going to say the line because, like I said, no spoilers, but there's one line that Alyssa Sutherland gives toward the beginning of the movie that really sold it for me. I'm like, yeah, this family really loves each other. They bicker like a family, they play with each other like a family, and there's just a lot of love to be had here. And that really just added a bit of substance, I think, that really pushed the movie over the top for me. Lily Sullivan's character, still absolutely loved. She's like the guardian aunt in this movie, which, one really interesting thing that I started noticing in the trailer and also in the movie is that Nell Fisher, when she's saying, I think it's Auntie Beth, because that's Lily Sullivan's character and the name is Aunt Beth, I believe. I swear she keeps saying Honey Beth for whatever reason. I don't know why. To me, it just sounds like Honey Beth, but I think she's saying Auntie Beth. Maybe it's a dialect thing. Maybe I'm just not picking up on it quite much, but I just found that to be really interesting. But all of that aside, the acting, the characters, the family really elevated the experience and cemented it for me the second time around. I noticed the cinematography and the sound a little bit more the second time around as well. I think one of the things that this movie's got going for it is, one, they changed the eye color of the characters when they are taken over, as it were. And not only that, the manner, the light, the color tones that they use in this film, especially when you're looking out of the peephole, they are a like dark blue, gloomy color and almost a little bit green as well. There's a bit of it that felt like it gave the movie a sense of despair for these characters. Like they're looking at like outside their door and they're like, oh my God, like that, what the heck's going on out there? That was just a whole different story altogether. Another thing that I tracked the second time around that I appreciated a lot more was the use of turntables in this film to convey some of the exposition that I talked about earlier. So earlier, like I mentioned, the mythology around the concepts of this movie, how they're conveyed, is mainly through character dialogue, of course, and also the second is through each of these characters listening to a turntable, specifically a vinyl record. The way that they went about it in the movie was so creative. It was really fascinating. And just the recording and the voice actor behind the vinyl records was just, it gives you chills and just sends them down your spine. I mean, even sitting here saying it out loud, I can feel like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I'm scratching the back of my head for those of you who are might be listening on audio right now. But I just thought that added a nice little extra spin on the movie overall that I wasn't quite expecting, or I didn't appreciate the first time around as much as I probably should have. But it just really added another dimension, really brought it to another level for me that I absolutely appreciated. Another thing I noticed the second time around is the movie's runtime felt extra crisp. For those of you who don't know, this movie runs at exactly, if I pull up IMDb again, 1 hour 37 minutes. Admittedly, the first time around when I watched it, it felt a little bit longer than that. Like I would have maybe clocked it at 1 hour 50, which was fine because I was really enjoying the experience and I could have sat there and watched it over and over and over again. Like I said, I'll probably go see it a third and a fourth time, who knows. But the second time around, the runtime felt especially concise. It didn't waste any time, even with the bookends of the movie that I don't absolutely love. And I really appreciate it for that because it's like you're always on your toes. You're always scared. You're always kind of freaking out at what you're seeing. And the movie doesn't waste any space, which I really appreciate. It's not to say that I would have hated this movie if they wasted any time. A majority of the movies that you watch will probably waste a little bit of time at some point. But the way that this movie executed about its business was just it was just straight to the point. It was really effective. It was really jarring, and it just kept your heart beating at all times. It was really engaging in that way, and I think that's what really helped elevate the experience as well. Now, as I'm sitting here talking, there is digging a little bit more into the imagery piece of this. Another thing that I kind of noticed, let me pull up the trailer again here, is there's a point where Alyssa Sutherland's character is laying in bed and it just looks, oh no, did my recording go out? No, it did not go out, but that was really eerie timing, so I apologize for those of you who might be watching on video. But anyway, back to what I was saying earlier, there's some really disturbing imagery in there where Alyssa Sutherland's character is laying in bed and it like one of the characters made a comment like, oh, it looks like someone beat her up, and I'm like looking and I'm like, oh, this is just really disturbing. Like her skin is like all gray, her eyes are dark as shit. Like it's just a combination out of your wildest nightmares. It's crazy. So I could gush about the imagery all day. The other thing that I really picked up on was some of the one-liners that they give in the movie. Now, this kind of plays a little bit into the comedic bits that I talked about a little bit earlier, but the way Alyssa Sutherland gives some of her creepy lines in this movie was just second to none. And this is one of the lines from the trailer, I think even cuts it a little bit short, but there's a line she gives in the trailer that comes across even better in the actual movie itself. And like the way she just gave it, I was like, holy shit. And it's like the first one where she is this turned person, entity, whatever you want to call it, and she says it and it's like, oh my God. I'm not going to say which line it is. Watch the movie and you'll draw your own interpretation, conclusion of it. But that is nightmare fuel if I've ever heard it. And just the combination of the imagery of her character at that moment, the body mannerisms, the delivery of the line, made for one of the creepiest lines I think I have heard in a horror movie ever. Like, that was some D1 shit right there. Like, it was phenomenal. I gotta stop looking at the trailer in the background. This is creeping me out. So, I've been talking for a while now, a half hour. This has been a really good conversation. So, where I currently stand on this movie, it's gonna be in my top 3 horror films of all time for many, many reasons that I'm not gonna recap here because I've gushed about it for 30 minutes now. I'm just kidding. I'm going to do it anyway. The excellent acting, cinematography, legendary performances by Alyssa Sutherland, Lily Sullivan, Morgan Davies, Gabrielle Eccles, Nella Fisher, all of them crush it in this movie. They make it really believable, especially when it comes to the family dynamic. This movie sets the tone right away, has one of the best title cards I've ever seen. It's actually scary. The imagery is ridiculous. The sound is just phenomenal. It's an incredible experience that you just shouldn't miss. It really is. Please go see this movie. Hell, call me. We'll go see it. Hell, I don't care. I'll travel wherever. So, where I stand in the movie, for me, it's a 9 out of 10. However, if I go see it a third time and I dig a little bit deeper into some of the issues I talked about before, who knows? It could be a full-blown masterpiece. But for now, I'm going to call Evil Dead Rise a borderline masterpiece. I, of course, recommend that you go see it. It's one of the best horror experiences that you'll probably have within the last 5 years. Probably one of the best you might have in the next 5 years as well. Unless more and more horror movies get made, which horror is hot right now in Hollywood. So more horror movies are going to come out. But those of this quality, that remains to be seen. So thank you all for listening. I greatly appreciate you listening to me ramble. If you enjoyed the movie, if you hated the movie, if it wasn't your cup of tea, let me know. I'd love to hear your perspective on that. Please tell me down in the comments below. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. All right, folks. So the next movie I'll review is The Pope's Exorcist, which I also saw today, but that'll be in a future video. But for now, I'll be signing off. Once again, this has been the... What did I name the channel again? I think I call it Bryce on Movies now. This has been the Bryce on Movies channel. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching if you're on YouTube or otherwise. I've been Bryce, and until next time, have a great day, y'all.